Hi, everyone. It's Kaylin Collier with Career Kickstart Conversations. And today we have another great episode going over two to three if we have some time, really interesting topics with Sarah from McAdams here today. I'll let her introduce herself in just a second. But wanted to tell you guys, the listeners, we're going to be jumping into job hopping, the pros and cons, the future, everything involved around job hopping. Then we're going to jump into AI. How does that affect recruiters, internal talent teams, maybe even hiring managers? We'll see where it goes. And then candidates, what does that look like for you now and in the future? And then to end it, if we get there, we'll kind of talk about the differences in hiring practices and generalities between small and large companies, all within the U.S. So anyway, without further ado, welcome, Sarah. Thanks for being on the podcast show today. If you want to tell the audience a little bit about you, and we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like she said, my name is Sarah, and I am the talent acquisition manager for McAdams, which is a civil engineering firm headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm in our Charlotte office, Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have been here for about 12 years now, which is crazy to think. And I moved here from Texas. I have been outside of talent acquisition I guess I've been in talent acquisition for about 5 years now, but I was in the sports and marketing, thought I wanted to be on the sidelines with the Carolina Panthers at one point, and realized that that was not a forever future for me. So I got into staffing, and lo and behold, on LinkedIn, a good old LinkedIn message to one of our staff members at McAdams, and I was employed about 3 years ago with them. So now I'm managing our recruiting firm.
Nice. Amazing. That's an interesting background. Usually if you get in recruiting or staffing, it's like right out of school. So you dabbled and then got into it.
Yes.
That's a really interesting background. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
So I'll jump right into it. I guess no pun intended, but job hopping. So has just been a huge topic, I feel like, in the past couple of years at least, especially since COVID, I feel like. But anyway, and when we say job hopping, just for the audience, it's, well, everyone has their term on hop, like what is a hop considered? 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is, 1 year. But job hopping is just those who consistently are moving jobs, no matter the reason. So what do you think about job hopping personally? And I mean, just generally, what do you think about it? I know it's a very open-ended question, but anyway, I want to start with that.
Honestly, job hopping has been, like you said, it's been a topic of conversation with our hiring managers and just in the industry itself. I think, post-COVID, before COVID and post-COVID, there's two different kind of realizations of job hopping. And now it's not really seen as a red flag as much anymore. We understand that there was a generational shift from working remotely to in office to what that looks like with companies. Some companies differ from others, meaning like the markets are changing, industry experience is changing. So, one person right out of college may have really good internships under their belt. And that's something that we look at, especially in our industry, is what internship experience did they have? Do they have 2? Do they have 3, 4 summers worth of internships? And then maybe it's taken them a little bit to get into their full-time gig because of these ever-changing corporations. Not only did the people have job hopping, but some of the corporations and industries and businesses had some job hopping experiences within kind of where they were going to go into the future. Were they going to be in-house? Were they going to have in-person employees? Was it going to be a work from home type, option or a flexibility type option? So I don't think it's as a red flag as it used to be. I think like I said, the generational shift. Like I said, I put in my notes, millennials and Gen Z workers, they've normalized this idea of changing jobs because they're the ones that are constantly seeing the trends online, social media presence, things being in their face of new things developing maybe in their career that they maybe not even were told at the beginning of their career that they could possibly do. So we've seen kind of this like trend inside of the generational shift. Competitive markets. I mean, there's so many competitors within our industry that are reaching out to those individuals that are okay with the shift. They're okay with the job hoppingness because they maybe have a demand for those workers, whereas we, maybe don't see it as a demand. But I don't think it's as a red flag as it used to be.
Okay. And that's a good point. Just it's like lifestyle and the culture that we're in now. And we see
Hmm.
everything and there's so much access to information. And even candidates will put on their LinkedIn, don't reach out to me if you're a recruiter. I
Right.
mean, who knew we'd ever be in that situation? If there's a candidate that knows that their resume looks a little bit job hoppy, do you have any advice for that person when they're going into an interview and they may be talking to a hiring manager that is a little bit more on that traditional side? Is there any tips that you would give to walk them through explaining why they have hopped?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And that's something that we go over with our hiring managers that are interviewing now is just be a little bit more open-minded than maybe were a couple years ago,
Mhm.
because there may be corporations or industries that didn't look at them before, or just kind of shifted them to the other, pile of like, let's not look at these anymore because they're too job hoppy. But for the candidates that are in that position and trying to get a job, I personally tell any of them coming in that if our hiring manager thinks that they're a little too job hoppy, I'm like, just explain your level of like tracking. Where did you start? Why did you possibly change direction? Was there a promotion change? Was there a leadership change? Um, did the industry get acquired? Did something happen within like the actual, company itself? Um, maybe it's you interviewed for a position and it wasn't what you thought when you walked in the door. Have that open mind in that direct, the actual interview is where you're going to tell your story. So I always tell people just be real. Tell them what you experienced during your interviews, why you maybe job hopped 2 years, 1 year, 4 years, etc. There's a lot of working moms out there that had young children. There's a lot of single family households that had to figure out what they were doing during COVID, working remotely. So there's a lot of more like give and take now for the candidate to be kind of on the upper side of the hiring managers to tell their story of why they maybe were in that position of job hopping, um, lack of stability within companies. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've heard on the candidate side that just make more sense than just automatically saying, okay, they're red flags. Let's put them in the pile. Let's not even look at them. We've opened up the door a lot more, especially in the last year, which is so many different companies not even looking at the candidate or not even having that open conversation and dialogue.
Okay. And those people that have job hopped and you gave them an opportunity, were there a lot of success stories? Were they that much different than the people who had longevity at a different company in their background? Like, I guess my question is, are there any differences that you've seen, or is it maybe too early to tell? Or have you noticed that the job hoppers, quote unquote, are also leaving y'all's company after, a year or two? And does that matter to you guys?
Yeah.
Where does that
So
fall?
I would say there's two different things to look at it. So we have kind of our corporate services and obviously those that are applying for like admin roles, IT, accounting, marketing, HR. Those are a little bit more higher turnover because there's a lot more growth and opportunities to kind of bounce in that direction of, okay, I want this versus that. Like you don't want to be stagnant at one position. Whereas we see our engineers that are entry level coming in, they have room for growth. So typically, you'll see in every industry, there's maybe 2 years minimum or max in which an employee is actually going to stay put. We have seen, I think, based off of culture, based off of room for growth, promotion, that we've had really good success with those that maybe were considered job hoppers at one time. I think it was because of the timing in which they were applying, aka post COVID.
Mm.
They were kind of a little job hoppy. Maybe companies shut down or they didn't have room for them to continue on with them. We actually have one admin that has been with us since COVID, and she's now in like her project coordinator role. She's been with us for about 4 years. And we've seen engineers be with us for, gosh, 5 years, 7 years, all the way up to, 20 years. We have some people in the industry within 20 years. So I would say definitely there's more positive into like the job hoppy candidates that we've seen. Um, I think it just comes with giving them a chance, seeing their growth projections within the company, and if they're able to stick it out. But yeah, we've had great success with it.
Great. That's awesome. That's great to
Yeah.
hear because a lot of people who are afraid of it also haven't given it a chance. And kind of going back to the candidate side and them explaining in the interviews or to recruiters why they're
Hmm.
making those jumps and giving those genuine, honest answers. I've heard and seen a lot of candidates not even being able to get to that, like being thrown in the stack. They're not able to get to that first screening with the recruiter or interview. Is there anything on their resume that they could do or any tips there? Like, should they put on their resume, layoff or
Mhm.
left for promotion or just any tips there when someone just can't even get in the door?
Yeah, I love anybody that can over communicate because we're the first people that see a resume or the first person that looks at their LinkedIn profile. I would say if you're someone that has had that trouble getting in the door, the foot in the door is over communicate on your resume, maybe at the top where it's like the skill set. Say, working mom was laid off during COVID and getting back into the workforce. They may have a great resume prior to COVID or prior to whatever year it is, but they're trying to get back into that industry or back into that lane of their experience. I always say update your LinkedIn profile, add a cover letter, add something that pertains to that job that they're looking into possibly interviewing for. If it's an admin role, list out your, experiences within the last admin role if you were kind of outside of that for a couple years or you've had job hoppiness. Yeah, I always say over communicate. I'm one that if you apply to a job and then you find me as the recruiter or the talent acquisition or the hiring manager, write them an email or write them a LinkedIn message saying, hey, I just applied to your open role. I'm really looking forward to hearing back from you. That's how I actually hired one of my own staff members in a sea of resumes of like 75 resumes that we had to go through. She actually took the time out of her day, messaged me on LinkedIn, connected with me, and then she messaged me again. So it brought her name up to the top of my messages. And so I actually took the time to read her message, clicked on her resume on LinkedIn, looked at her cover letter, looked at kind of her skill set on her LinkedIn profile and kind of made that connection. And then we set up an interview. So I would say the more that you can get out there and put your foot forward and be seen by those in the masses of emails that are being, applicants coming in, I would say do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you can communicate.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you mentioned the cover letter too, especially for those who are not getting their foot through the door the first time.
Yep.
It's just an extra way to explain something or pitch yourself and
Yeah.
just make it stand out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like cover letters were in, then they came out, and then they're coming back
I
in.
know. I
It's that
know.
old
I know.
fashioned.
It's so crazy. Yeah, it's just the trends. It's like, is it still okay to do that? Is it a requirement? I'm like, if you're really looking to get in, I think the more that you can provide information on yourself and kind of your status, I think that just helps just kind of paint a big picture for you.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned, like, tailor it to that opportunity, especially in a cover letter.
Correct.
'Cause I think a cover I personally think is even more supposed to be tailored than your resume. I mean,
Yes.
people say to
Yeah.
tailor your resume too, but if you're having to tailor your resume too much for a job, it might be a stretch.
Right.
So I think the cover letter is just you can get so nitty gritty with that from a job description, especially for the roles you really want and are interested
Right.
in.
Right.
Those are really good tips. And I should have started with this question in the beginning, but what do you consider a job hopper? Is it 2 years or any specific amount of time?
I feel like that 2 years is a good. It's just a good course. I mean, I think it's just because we've always just said, "Oh wow, they've changed within 2 years. Let's not go there." But I would say, obviously, if there's a month here and a month there, and I'm like, okay, something's going on. And I'm not opposed to reaching out to those types of candidates and saying, hey, I saw that you were at so and so in 2022, and then you hopped to 2023 and 2024. Like, what's going on? And sometimes they're like, it wasn't a match or it wasn't a fit. But I would say, 2 years, and then you ask those questions of like, did the company change? Was there no room for growth? What was your deciding factor of changing and moving? Did you not see yourself there long term? And kind of weighing out the pros and cons. But yeah, I would say for me, 2 years would probably be a little bit on the job hoppy side.
Okay. Yeah. That's what it kind of seems to be like online and with other people too.
Yeah.
Not 2 years considered to where you want to question probably their
Yes.
motives on why they're wanting to leave and whatnot.
Yeah.
And in general, pros and cons of job hopping, because that's kind of where the conflict happened is like, well, I'm job hopping because here's all the pros. And then someone's
Right.
on the opposite side is like, well, here's all the cons. So what are
Yeah.
the pros and cons and your thoughts on that?
So I wrote this out, so I'm going to read it and then we can kind of go over it. But the pros that I wrote out is skill development. They actually gain exposure to kind of the different things that they're, maybe acquiring in those 2 years. So building on a variety of tasks that they maybe are learning from. So I can see that kind of benefiting. Salary growth is a pro. So if they're hopping just because of more money, I completely understand that. PTO, coverage, vacation, kind of that whole benefits package. Obviously, career advancement, I think that's a big one. Job changes can allow individuals for that growth. And, obviously everybody wants that advancement. And then work-life balance, like that's a big one. Still to this day, it's, hey, where's my work-life balance? Am I going to be working 60 hours a week? Am I going to be working in that 40 to 45? Am I going to be paid overtime? If those don't align with that individual, then I can see why they would probably want to job hop to those companies that offer, unlimited PTO or advancement to seeing your career path within a 5-year range, starting at an entry level to manager, director, etc. So I would say those are probably like my top 4: skill development, salary growth, career advancement, and work-life balance for the pros. As far as cons, obviously lack of stability. So you're seen as being a job hopper, and I think that's kind of a negativity as its own. Risk of being perceived as undecided. Missed deep experience. So obviously if you're not there for a scheduled amount of time, you're missing out on the experience of getting to know your coworkers, really engaging in the culture, that room for growth or the promotion, end of year bonuses. You're missing out on that stability. And then just the possible gaps in that knowledge. You may be, and I'm going to use it on our end, like if you're applying for an engineer, our designers are considered designer ones, which are entry level. And they could be a designer one for their first 3 years until they engage into their pre-certification to advance to the next job title. And so there's certifications that some employees need to gain or continue education. And so if you're missing that by job hopping, you're missing those gaps of the knowledge.
Yeah. I was thinking that the gaps in knowledge is an interesting one too, because there's also like the pro where you can gain a lot of knowledge and diverse experience, different size companies, all that. But then I feel like eventually there's like a gap and then there's almost a cap out.
Right.
I mean, I think as a hiring manager myself, I see someone job hopping, I'm going to hire them for something that they've already done because I'm kind of worried that if I invest in a ton of training, I'm going to invest a lot of time and money into you and then you're gone in 2
Exactly.
years. But maybe I could really utilize that 2 years, but I'm just going to hire you for what you've already done.
Right.
And then you might get kind of stuck in that pattern until someone wants to give you a chance or you stayed a little bit longer at a company just from like when I'm hiring people, that's what I'm looking at.
Right.
And I know that some other hiring managers, so I feel like you must like cap out on your skill set if you're constantly like, I don't know, maybe mix it up with a 4-year here and a 2-year there or something.
Right.
And I had a stat on this and it kind of goes back to your generational gap comment as well. So millennials change jobs every 2.8 years on average, and then boomers stay around 8 years. I didn't know it was that long for a boomer. I knew it was longer, obviously, and then it says job hoppers earn 15 to 20% more with each switch compared to a 3% annual raise. But I do want to point out that you can still get promotions internally, and then that's a 10 to 20% raise. So if you just stay in the same role, you're averaging 3%. So kind of goes to your pro on the salary increase.
Yeah, no, that's interesting about like going back to the generational thing. We just had a lunch and learn on that. And just how, you have a team maybe that has a boomer as a lead and then has several millennials and then Gen Z, Gen X. So it's how they communicate and how they see like this topic, how they would see a job hopper. The boomers perspective is way different than a Gen X or Gen Z that we've heard about because it just means differently. It means different in their world. And then progressions and, money and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Do you think that with the job hopping becoming a norm, do you see any major changes in what companies will do? Like, do you see any companies changing anything if everyone generally starts staying at companies 2 to 3 years. Like, that becomes a complete norm 10 years from now. What do you see happening if anything?
That's a good question. I would say it would come down to a little bit more in depth of the interview process. Like if your job required like a test of some type of skill set, really diving into those candidates that, let's say you had 5 candidates that change jobs within every 2 years. Obviously, you need to decipher which one's kind of the better out of the 5.
Ooh.
So I would probably suggest hiring managers do kind of like a technical skill set or a writing test or a portfolio sample of some sort, kind of the extra addition to the interview process to gauge which ones are kind of the stronger candidates. But no, that's a great one because I think it is becoming more of the norm. I'm seeing a lot more of, I guess, the quote unquote job hoppers applying, and a lot of them are moving too. A lot of people are moving these days. And
Yeah.
so they're moving zip codes, they're moving states, they're moving their family to a better, closer area to their family. And so maybe that's a thing. It's like, are people just moving because they have more flexibility in their jobs currently to where the spouse can move, but the other one has a full remote job?
Mm.
So it's getting diving in more of their personal background. Like, why are you moving every 2 years? Oh, my wife is fully remote and I have the capability to move the family, so I'm applying for this job. That could be a definite example. But yeah, I guess going back to that one question is just how to decipher the candidates coming in that have the job hoppiness is really maybe engaging in like a extra interview process.
Yeah, yeah. So you're gonna get a little more strict on the actual skill set
Mm-hmm.
and quality of candidate
Mm-hmm.
that's coming in. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm very interested to see how it's gonna play out, and I'm like, I wonder if companies are gonna bring back pensions to get people to
Yeah,
stay. 'Cause
true.
that's why
Yeah,
people stayed back, the boomer generation would stay 'cause
right.
there was a big reason, and there's still 401(k) and 401(k) matches, but
Yeah,
even if you have a match, but you're getting, a 10 to 15% raise every time you switch jobs, that match won't even ever catch up.
exactly.
Um, but one tip I will give the audience from my experience is just check out your 401(k) vesting. I've seen a lot of people leave
Mhm.
companies and they're like 2 months from being fully vested in their 401(k), and I know a lot of
Yeah,
people don't really understand that, but play out the 2 months and then move. Like, it's just 2
yeah,
months. You're already there for 2
yeah,
years. Get your money that you
yeah.
waited for, and every company's is different. I think the average is, 3 years, though, for
Yeah.
being fully vested is I think what I saw. It's
Yeah, and
tricky.
and do your research. If your company provides like a staffing agency or a type of company that goes over your benefits, like use those to fully understand before you actually just kind of leave and don't know what your full package is. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, exactly. I think we covered a lot on the job hopping. Anything else you wanted to add or cover on that topic before we jump into AI?
I put like a conclusion, just kind of like an end all be all. Like I wrote out just in today's market, trends are changing frequently, and so just be very vocal about why you're searching. And like I said, the over communication in your resume, your portfolio, your LinkedIn profile. I just think the more that you can supply those details, the more the hiring managers are going to listen on the other end. So I wouldn't consider that it's a negativity or like even a red flag even today. I would just say lean on it and say, hey, the world's changing and so am I. So here's what my capabilities and my talent can bring to you. So just be over communicative of all that.
Yeah, and an audience too, the way that Sarah was answering the questions earlier, I was thinking, I'm like, this sounds good from if you were a candidate.
Hmm.
Like the way you were just explaining it was delivered really well. And I think that's a really big piece of explaining to a hiring manager why you've moved and why you like it's a big part of it is the delivery, the tone in your voice. And
Yeah,
are you confident with your changes or are you getting defensive in a way? Because it's a topic and that
it
people are
is.
emotional
Yeah,
about. So try to just deliver it professionally, concise, to the point, and be confident with it, and I think
yeah,
that'd be a big piece at the interview stage.
yeah. And I'll give one like small example really quick. So there was a colleague of mine, and he reached out to me, his aunt, who was obviously later in her career, and she had been a caregiver, but she's also a nurse, a registered nurse, and she was a caregiver for 14 years. Um, unfortunately, the person that she was caregiving for passed away. And so she was getting back into the job market. So she reached out to me and I told her that I would go over, resume and cover letter and details and just go over kind of the interview process because she wasn't in the interview stages for 14 years. So she was kind of out of the game. And one of her questions was like, how am I going to be a standout candidate compared to the younger candidates or the ones that have been in the faster pace ERs and hospital systems and clinics when she was just a caregiver for one person, but she has as a registered nurse on her profile for 20 plus years. And so we went over it and I said, you have to be confident and tell your story. You have to let them know that you're just as qualified as so-and-so applying. You probably may have more experience in XYZ. You just have to lean on that and share your story. And so she ended up getting the job and she was really excited. And it was with a smaller clinic. So I think with her smaller, capacity in which she worked with in the past couple years, it helped her with the smaller clinic versus those candidates coming in from like a faster atmosphere, several stories of hospital settings and all that kind of stuff. So, there's success stories out there with the interviewing and job hopping and kind of being out of that world of, the hiring. So
100%. Even if it doesn't seem trendy what everyone wants, you have a skill set that probably a lot of those people don't have, and lean on that and find like someone's looking for that. Even though you may not think it's the trendiest thing out there, someone out there wants it. And there's good opportunities with small companies, big companies, they're everywhere. You just kind of got to figure out your strengths, what you gain from that, and then use that to level up in your next opportunity if that's kind of what you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, really good addition. So AI in talent acquisition, when it comes to internal talent acquisition, recruiting, and candidates. So I guess if you could just explain in general, what is AI and where do you see AI affecting talent acquisition from like a high level?
Yeah. So we are still in conversation with this as a company and as a whole and just within talent acquisition and hiring because AI is everywhere. I mean, it's within the LinkedIn platform that we use every day to source candidates and to find candidates. And, you can use an AI tool to write an email. You can use an AI tool to sift through all the candidates that applied to a project manager role. You can use AI for reaching out to them, emailing themselves without you even like having that conversation with that person. And there's just so many different things that I still think and feel that we have to work through in order for us to be completely AI. Obviously, because I think hiring in general and working with people and having a culture, it still requires that human connection. And humans, they thrive for that. You want that human connection. You want that coworker that hired you to know you, that you've hired. And it's just, I think that AI could possibly take that out of that that lack of human connection. So that's what scares me about it. But all in all, I think there's pros and cons with everything. So we are, as a company, still working through that. And as of right now, we are using it for sifting through applications that are just very high level with keywords to find in their resumes and within their applications.
Okay. And so is that through your ATS system or just LinkedIn or both?
Through both, mainly we have one connected through our AT system. And then within LinkedIn, we have the platform that helps, and we can toggle it on and off whether we want to use it or not during certain, platforms or certain jobs. But right now, we're only using it a little bit in our applicant tracking system.
And I haven't been, so I'm like on the sales side and staffing. So I haven't like been in recruiting since this big AI boom, at least the big one. So when it comes to like in your ATS or LinkedIn and AI and you mentioned the keywords. So is it AI where you click a button and it's matching keywords from the resume to the job description, or are you typing in the keywords and then it's pulling up those resumes in your, applicant batch and matching it to the keywords you choose?
Yeah. So a little bit of both. So like if we did a job posting, let's say I'm going to use a project manager for engineering. If we do the job post, we can actually attach the AI app to it to look for any project manager that applies that has these credentials or skill sets. On the flip side, if we are doing kind of just a continued search on our own and we're actually going in and saying, find project managers within the zip code of XYZ that have 5+ years civil design, AutoCAD, all the skills that we want to look, and then we can find that using the AI feature. So we use in a little bit of both. It just helps kind of sort out and weed out some of the ones that maybe we don't need to find within a certain year range, or they don't have a certain qualification or certification. We've had some hiccups, so that's why I'm not fully using it 100%. And I just don't, I want to use, us that are still skilled in this workforce as recruiters and hiring managers to help find those people that they want to find versus just using only AI. But we have the capability of using it to our discretion.
Okay. So you
Yep.
sounds like you guys mainly use it just to kind of short list the resumes that you guys have based
Yes.
on keywords. So for a candidate, which a lot of resume advice is already keywords, match it to the job
Mm-hmm.
description. With AI in play, is that still the general tip that you would give candidates?
Yes. I would say always lean into the job description that you're applying to. Make sure if it says required qualifications, whatever that is, that you have those required qualifications, because those are typically the ones that we're using AI to sift through those resumes. And it's more of the sourcing. It's just higher level sourcing, quicker sourcing for us to go through a buku amount of resumes versus just us going through page 1, page 2, page 7. They're helping us like lean into shortening that list.
Okay. Okay,
Yep.
great. How do you think AI will reshape the candidate experience, if any, and not like too far out in the future, but I mean, now have you
Mm-hmm.
seen it? Have you seen y'all's candidate experience change with AI, or have you utilized it in that way besides the resume filtering?
Yeah, I would say just accessibility, like faster response time. I feel like there's some candidates that use AI for like email writing or maybe cover letter writing, maybe to help them, zhuzh up their background a little bit. So there's that. I want to make sure, as a human recruiter and a human talent acquisition team, that we're trying to, make sure that we're having those conversations about their resume, their qualifications, their cover letters that they're presenting to us, because there's some that have applied and you're like, is this AI? Are they using AI? So I would say that the question of it now and kind of the unknown, as if people are using AI all the time, it's a little scary, because people can totally make up their own resume or their own cover letter just by using completely AI, even an email response. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if it's creating more, I don't know, a benefit for them, but at the same time, we're also kind of using our human connection to make sure that these people are actually doing and qualified for what they're applying for. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if it would hinder or help at this point. But in the future, it kind of scares me as much as people are using it now, like them totally making up their own resume and using AI and not putting any of their own information on there. Um,
Yeah.
so that makes me a little scared on the future.
Yeah. I've seen it a little bit too, and I don't know. It's hard for me to say like, oh, I can tell this is AI versus I can't because it's still new and
Right.
everyone's so different. But I've definitely noticed like Gen Z using it a lot
Oh
more
yeah.
for like emails and stuff. All right. So AI, obviously new thing, but in the future, I know we talked about this just a little bit already, but say like
Mhm.
10 years from now, do you think we'll have jobs? Like, do you think there's going to be like robots kind of interviewing these
Wow.
people and everything's going to be digital and recruiters won't exist? Like, what do you think that looks like? Just, I know this is fully a full opinion.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean that statement of having robots kind of freaks me out. But like I kind of mentioned before, I just think in our world and hiring, humans want to be connected with. They want to have that human connection. Um, Even though AI will help with faster response time, transparency, accessibility, some personalization, unconscious bias, but like I still think and believe that there needs to be a human connection. Um, it may help us. We may use it on apps. We may have it integrated into like some of our systems, but I don't think it's going to fully take over.
Okay, that's good.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I know, right? Being optimistic.
Yeah.
So you see it in like the far future, or let's just say 10 years out.
Yeah.
It just being a helping hand for candidates and for hiring managers, talent acquisition, just to get the job done faster.
Yes.
Hopefully there'll be like an AI feedback because I feel like that is the number one candidate
Right.
thing is like they just never get feedback. I think that would be cool to see AI just help deliver that feedback faster. I have some stats regarding AI as well that I found interesting and looked up before this. So it says 67% of recruiters say AI saves them time, especially in searching for resumes like LinkedIn, how you mentioned. 44% worry about AI-driven bias. So you mentioned that as well. 86% of HR professionals predict that AI will automate interviews and hiring within 5 years. That was from Oracle. And then 83% of candidates feel AI improves their application experience by speeding up. Oh, feedback. Okay. I didn't read that one. It was like on the side of my page. Okay. For AI too, so I'm kind of jumping back again, but candidates, a lot of them use AI to help them build their resume or build the whole resume. If a candidate does use AI to help them build their resume, what tips would you give them? You know, like maybe the AI didn't do their full resume, but it helped them out a little bit. Any tips you would give them when someone's just utilizing AI for a resume?
That's a great question too. Make sure that you, as a person applying to a job, you write out your skill set, college experiences, your outside of college experiences. I think AI can help translate the sentences better, loop it better into like how it feeds into the resume. But I think as far as being a human and writing your own resume, you need to know your own experiences. You need to put your like own touch on it. Use AI for just kind of like punctuations or sentence structure.
Okay. Yeah, I could agree with that. If you have a very strong assumption that a candidate is emailing you and their resume is very AI generated, how does that make you feel? And would you move forward with that candidate to that next stage?
So that's kind of like going back to the job hoppiness. It's kind of like a little red flag right now. I feel like this may be the new thing. It's like job hoppy's in and AI's out. So I'm okay with them using the AI, like using the punctuation, sentence structure, formatting. I would just hope that they would have a personality behind it. If they were to make it in the final, interview process. But I'm okay with it. I think if you're using it totally and every day, you're gypping yourself on, experiences. So maybe use it to your discretion.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
We can dive into, I would say like 10 minutes if you have the time to jump into like the small and big companies. Because I know you work with a really large company, McAdams Civil Engineering. I work for a really small company, but just in general, and this is kind of, I guess, more for like TA hiring managers, what are the different approaches that talent acquisition has in a large company versus a smaller one? Or is there any difference at all?
So I would say, number one, it's the personal connection. You're smaller, it's easier to connect with that hiring group or the TA group. I think the smaller companies have a little upper hand on employer branding, storytelling, capturing the culture, whereas larger brands, you may be talking to one person on Thursday, several people on Friday, group meeting on Monday, and you're like, who am I talking to? So sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, but with larger companies, you hope that they all have their kind of consecutive and strategic things lined up, so it's not chaotic. So you have the smaller companies that are kind of still trying to figure it out, more human connection. You may talk with one person throughout the whole interview process, or you have the larger branding companies that have their ducks in a row. You're talking to a few higher ups, the leadership team, C-suite, whoever's doing the interview process, and they have their things already kind of lined up. So there's benefits to both, I think.
Okay. So is that initiative for you, since McAdams is larger? Is it, I don't know if this would fall under like you or marketing or collaboration, but I guess what is McAdams doing to show more of like their culture and some of the things that big businesses don't have as much of an upper hand than small business does?
Yeah, so we have several groups within our corporate services team that we really lean in on helping capture our culture with social media. We just rebranded and did a whole new website. Each office kind of moved, and so we have these state-of-the-art, awesome buildings that we're in now. So they captured new footage, videos, photos of our new office spaces. we make sure that we are relevant to all of our career campuses for colleges and universities to get into the entry-level young students. But yeah, we lean on our marketing. We have a communications and client experience kind of group that helps with like getting emails out and social media postings. So we do definitely work together on that as far as cohesiveness there.
Nice. Okay. And do you guys,
Yeah.
you mentioned the partnerships or the relationships you have with the colleges to get recent grads. Now, is
Mhm.
that for, you mentioned the entry level roles. Do you guys, I have a feeling you said this earlier, because sorry if I'm wrong, but you do an intern, I know you hire internships, but do you
Mhm.
offer an internship through McAdams and then a trajectory for them to move up past that?
Oh, yeah. We've had several interns that have become full-time hires. We are really big on summer internships, and we've even taken some that like start in the spring, work part-time still in college and universities, and then continue on with us full-time into the summer. It's beneficial for like the juniors and seniors that have less classes that they're going to. So some may have only like 8 to 10 hours a semester, and they have all the time in the world, so they're going to work 10 hours a week.
And for your partnerships with the colleges, if, civil engineering student wants an internship with you guys, do they, obviously they can go directly to you, but through the partnership, does the school send an email to them? Do they go to their career resource center, or do you know what that looks like on there?
So majority of the colleges and universities that we work with, they're on a platform called Handshake. So they actually have job postings that the company can post in which they're looking for. So we can post internships, entry levels, whatever we're hiring for. And then we pick which students we're looking for. So anywhere from freshman all the way to senior, those that have master's student or studies, and even those that are still alumni can visit and see what's open on our website.
We've noticed, at least from our recruitment efforts in the past couple of years, been highly, highly competitive.
Oh, yeah.
So, and the salaries have shot up across multiple departments, not just in civil
Mhm.
engineering, but kind of everywhere, especially related to construction. But my question is, how are
Yeah.
you guys attracting and retaining talent? Because they're really, really hard to find, especially in
Yeah.
Raleigh.
Yeah. I would say location is big. I mean, we have huge metros that we're involved in. So Raleigh, Charlotte, Durham, DFW, Texas, and we're growing. And so there's kind of like a perk to that. We do have a really great group of young professionals. So we definitely highlight that when we are at career fairs and sharing that those individuals maybe started as interns and then they moved their way up to entry level designers and then now they're project managers. And so we kind of paint the picture of the growth pattern and where they can go within the company. Obviously, we change our benefits package a little bit to be a little bit more competitive with our area competitors. So we like highlight that as well. And then our company does certain highlights, such as like group travel trips that we get to go on with employees. So like a perk like that. But yeah, we highlight kind of your projected growth pattern and where you can go within McAdams. If you were to start in Charlotte, and let's say you want to move to Texas, you could work possibly in our Texas office. We try to hone in on the ones that we want to keep. And if you're willing to stay with McAdams, we'll work with you on where you want to move. So we've had several people that have like switched offices. We have tons of people from Raleigh that maybe moved to Charlotte, or Charlotte people moved to Texas, and then we've had that kind of rotation of people work in our offices.
Cool. That's great. It sounds
Yeah.
like those are really big initiatives too to help retain talent.
Yes.
And kind of jumping back to the job hopping with that approach to the market, and it sounds like a really big push towards, at the career fairs and recent grads
Mhm.
and junior level candidates. Have you seen the job hopping happening at your company, or do you see that generation staying?
It's kind of crazy. We've seen a lot in our entry level. They've stayed with us pretty solid. We're seeing more of the middle range, kind of before they're project managers, where maybe they're not getting as much money as they hear from another company, or they're getting messages on LinkedIn from other companies approaching them, kind of dipping their toe into seeing what's out there. So I'm seeing less on the entry level, kind of that Gen Z, Gen X generation, more on like the millennial and even some of the higher level. I think that maybe goes to people being more aggressive on LinkedIn and approaching candidates and asking what their, PTO looks like. Are you happy with your job? So yeah, I think I'm seeing more of that higher level millennial kind of transition.
One stat that I did find that was interesting is that 45% of hires at small businesses come from referrals versus 30% at large companies, which I thought was really surprising. Another stat, a lot of big businesses spend like 30% more on recruitment efforts, whether that's software, staffing, internal TA. But I found that interesting because I feel like big companies have the upper hand with referrals because you have way more employees. Do you guys have a referral program?
We do. I was going to mention that. We do have a pretty solid referral concept, and we have gotten a ton of referrals recently just with all of our younger group post-grad. They stay in contact with the ones that are, behind a year or two. They stay in contact with their professors. And so they kind of keep that conversation flow. It's helping for me and for the TA team because, like, if we go on campus, we'll say, hey, send a message to your professor, send a message to your sorority, and we get a lot of people through that is through the referral bonus. And so we do a payout after their first 90 days of employment and half of their payout after their 180 days.
Oh, nice. Great. It kind of leads me to one last question with this, and it kind of encompasses everything we talked to, probably minus AI. But would you suggest a candidate to reach out, like if they wanted to roll at McAdams and they want a project manager role and they reach out to another project manager there and say, hey, I know that you guys preference referrals. Can you pass a resume along? Does that ever happen? Or how would you feel about that? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have people that message me that maybe I talked to at a career fair and they didn't get a job with us, but they'll refer someone that they thought maybe would fit in the role. We've had that scenario, or we've had people that just say, hey, there's someone that I know that's graduating this year, and I think that you would be interested in them, and they'll pass them along. So I'm open to any referral coming through and emailing it. Yeah.
Oh, so that's another good tip for candidates, because a lot of the larger companies have something similar, not all of them.
Yep.
But yeah, maybe get out there and network with the right people, and that's a way to get looked at and noticed without, fancy cover letter or this, that, and the other.
Right.
Do it all. Like, don't slacker it on anything, but just another direction to go, because it makes me sad. Every time I get on LinkedIn, it's just, 455 days, 5,000 applications. And I'm just like, man.
I know.
Why?
It's sad to see the big numbers when they grow and they keep going. It's like, oh my gosh. But I'll hit on there. There's an example that when we have our group meetings here in Charlotte, one of the big things that we always highlight is no matter what position you're in, what year or how long you've been with us, the more you can network, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. You're not jumping ship, and we're not afraid that you're going to go take another job. Just network. You never know where those connections are going to build or get you or involve them coming to the company. For the longest time, the designers here, the early entry level positions, they're like, oh, that's on you. Sarah and her team has to only recruit. We're like, no, y'all can recruit too. So yeah, I would say if you're looking for a job, reach out to your network and your connections, no matter where they are. You never know who knows who someone.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's really anything you wanted to add on AI or, small companies, large companies, anything.
Yeah, I think on the AI, I think that's such a hot topic these days. And so, like I said earlier, use it to your best judgment. I think, as being on the other side of it, you can tell when it's AI. It's a little scary when you can't tell it's from AI, but I think that's where our world's leaning into. And so I would say just use it to your discretion.
Yeah. And I think you and I touched on this a little bit when we were just on the phone last month or so, but I would say just for candidates, because a lot of them aren't in TA and stuff that are listening, a lot of stuff's going on AI, internet, digital. Just be careful with scams. If you ever think a email is fishy, and feel free to add your tips on this, Sarah, but call the company, ask to speak to that recruiter whose email you got it from. If the email looks fishy, if it's McPadams and not McAdams, don't reply. It's not. So
we had that happen actually about last month, and we were hit hard through LinkedIn scam with a posted job, and we had several candidates that messaged myself, the TA team, some of our front of house, asking if we were sending out offer letters, and they had our whole header and everything addressed to them. So we had to send mass messages and call the candidates that thought they were getting a job offer over the internet that it was not going to happen. So we worked with our IT department, took it down, scrubbed it, did a whole new post. But it was a solid like week and a half of just continuous messages of these candidates asking if this was real or not.
Oh, no. It's really nice that you guys did something about it, though. I mean, as a
Yes.
company
Yeah.
should, but there's some companies that would be like, well, not our
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn has cut on that a little bit. Like they made our company verify that we really worked there with our
Right.
company email address. Just be careful out there with what you're getting in sketchy looking emails. Is that any tips for a candidate to double check? Like what we talked about, is that the tip you would give, or anything else to reach out to that company and talk to TA? Is this a real offer?
Yeah, I think the ones that did definitely reach out to us either by phone, by email, or just were like, hey, I don't know if this is right or not, but I just want to let you know that this is going through LinkedIn and it's surfacing, and I just want to make sure that this is real or not. So I appreciate them reaching out to us and letting us know like ahead of times. But yeah, reach out to the actual company, search the people bar who you can reach out to that's maybe an HR, talent acquisition, recruiting, or even like accounting, any kind of corporate services that to see if it's a fish or any not.
Yeah, and make sure on LinkedIn, like, the person looks legit, that they
Yes.
work there, because I don't know, who in the audience knows and doesn't know this, but you can put that you work at any company. LinkedIn isn't gonna clock it all. So just make sure like they're legit. Call the corporate line of McAdams and ask to speak to, Sarah in HR, whoever. Oh gosh. Well, I think that wraps everything up. Really, really good tips here. So thanks for coming on.